Good. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, hi, I'm Aaron, and I'm here to tell you that something is happening in your government. Let's see, a little about me first. Like Ian said, I'm a transplant. I'm an American from A to Z. My career path, they're supposed to go like that, and I think like many people in the room probably, mine has been more like that. I studied computer science in university. Then I went to Microsoft for a few years. I was at Google earlier, so I had a little insert in here to wait for boo. I spent some years on the Exchange server team, and I was supposed to wait for more boos there. Then I became a lawyer, so I'm like, there you go. The group knows what to do. All right. And I liked being a lawyer so much that I ran back into technology, and actually law and tech together were what is how I ended up on President Obama's first election campaign, and that's where I fell back in love with using technology to solve people's problems. And working on that campaign eventually led me to this pretty new U.S. government program called the Presidential Innovation Fellows. This was a vehicle for Todd Park, at the time was the U.S. CTO, to bring folks into government from the high-tech private sector for 6 or 12 months to pair them with departments and agencies who had asked for fellows to sit and start to try to think differently about hard problems those departments were facing that maybe could use an infusion of different thinking, different tools, different practices, different ideas about how to organize and talk about these things. On the first day of the program, Todd got up in front of all of us and said, I just want to let you know this is a bait and switch program. You've signed up for 6 or 12 months, but you're probably going to be here a lot longer. And because you will fall in love with the problems, and in fact, I signed up for 6 months and was a federal employee for 4 years. So that's how yes, and then, sorry, okay. So, because what happened was about 3 months into that fellowship program, healthcare.gov was launched, which is to say that it didn't launch, and suddenly the conversation in the federal government shifted, because before that moment, most folks, when thinking about how they would attack online service problems, would say, well, I will do it the same way everybody else does it, and the same way it's always been done. And as of October 1st, 2013, everyone in government was suddenly saying, if I do it the same way everybody else has been doing it, I might get my boss fired. I might get fired. I might be on the front page of the paper and not in a good way. Is there anyone around who knows how to do this differently? And the fellows who had been in government all of 3 months, we have an idea. And there were a few different folks who had ideas. There were lots of folks. And so the fellows who had signed up for 6 months suddenly created a more permanent unit called 18F. And 18F grew from 10 fellows and 5 government civil servants working as a team at the beginning on a couple projects, grew to, I think at its peak, it was over 200 people. Building digital services with partners all over government, building platforms and standards, doing all kinds of things. So that's how I ended up spending lots of time in beautiful Washington, D.C., until last year, when I got a call from someone who had been part of that program and was actually secretly an Ottawan, and said, hey, you should apply for this other thing we're doing here now. And that's how I ended up in this beautiful national capital of an incredible country. Hang on, I think I have a more recent picture that my COO took, though. Yes, that's the one. Okay. I did not come here for the weather. I came here to lead a team called the Canadian Digital Service, the Service Numérique Canadienne. I'm learning French. Executives in the federal service are expected to know French and to know really fine academic bureaucratic French, and I did not learn a lick of French until about 8 months ago. So anyway, CDS is something new. We are a tech consultancy inside government for government. our mandate is to help the government of Canada get better at delivering digital services by helping it embrace new practices, new tools on the path to designing and building and delivering services. So I showed up in April. I wanted to establish my cred with the dev team. I'm not just a functionary. All right, so I found a bug on the website, and I cloned the repo myself, and I did it in my text. I did it in terminal with VI. I reproed the bug. I fixed it. I did a pull request to push my fix live, and then I was reminded exactly why I'm not a developer anymore. Yes. Thankfully, we have much better developers than myself on the team, and not just in Ottawa. We now have teammates in Montreal, in Toronto, right here in Kitchener-Waterloo area, here at Communitech, Andrew and Brian. and we're setting up in Vancouver pretty soon, too. And in fact, this digital service consultancy inside government, for government model precedes CDS, it precedes 18F in the UK in the early 2010s. A couple of folks, including a senior member of the House of Lords and a senior civil service executive, decided, in their words, to help the UK stop being the frog that boils without knowing it's boiling. And with respect to IT and technical debt and falling behind the services that people expect. So GDS has been around since about 2011, 18F and USDS both since 2014. The United States Digital Service, there are teams like this popping up all around the globe, in Finland, Estonia, New Zealand, Australia, Denmark, and at provincial and state and city levels. So Hilary Hartley with the Ontario Digital Service and teams in cities as well. So, okay, so and all of this begs the question, what do we mean by digital? Because a lot of folks in government, a lot of folks in general hear digital and think tech, they think online, they think the computers. And that's not really what we're after, because we all know that most services aren't really what we'd expect digitally from government yet, but most services aren't completely offline either. They're somewhere in the middle, right? So they're online services. So I applied for temporary residency. Anybody else here gone through temporary residency or immigration here? Yeah, a couple, okay. And the process was online. I downloaded, I think, 8 or 9 PDFs. I had to download not the current version, but a previous version of Adobe Acrobat Reader to fill them out. Then I had to upload them. Then I had to wait for somebody to process things, and I had to go log in because I wasn't going to get notified. Anyway, that's not what we mean by digital, right? So what do we mean? So we take Tom's definition. Tom is an early founder of the team in the UK. Digital is applying the culture and practices and processes and technologies of the internet era to respond to people's higher expectations. And that's what we're after. So here are the 3 things we're explicitly asked to do in the document that creates CDS: to deliver solutions with partner departments all across the federal government, to build capacity, that is to say, to help those departments learn to deliver modern digital solutions themselves, and to provide advice across the board. So how do we do all that? And like, I'm going to boil down to one quick statement, which is that the strategy is delivery. And this doesn't sound shocking to anybody in this room. These are you all, by and large, this is how you think and work every day. But in a very old, very complex, very rules-oriented bureaucracy like a government, this actually sort of stands on its head, the general approach, which is to drive from policy and then hand off to implementation. And in our world, we know that doesn't work unless the people creating policy understand the digital so well and have done the user research and have done the prototyping and have done the experimenting and gotten the user feedback. And so that's not how it works at all. So I'm being a little vague. So let me take this into some examples. And okay, so problems. We spoke last year to Veterans Affairs of Canada. Fewer than 20% of veterans partake of any benefits that are offered by Veterans Affairs Canada. And VAC wanted to know why that was, and they wanted to increase that number because they feel they can be better serving more veterans after their tours. So we did what we do, right? We sent a team from our team, which was much smaller then. We're up to about 60 plus folks now. We sent a team with user research skills, with design skills, with product management skills, with engineering skills, and a policy expert to hack through bureaucratic issues, and together worked with the folks from VAC, and not just from one little office in VAC, but folks from the IT shop, from the services shop, from the online services shop, from the communications shop, because all these folks need to be brought together to solve these problems. And this is the first result of that. This is a tool that helps veterans find the benefits they're eligible for. And just for perspective, a lot of this work is not actually the technology work, right? We like to say that the hard part is not necessarily the digital, right? The hard part is usually the process and the system and the government. So one of the most important things here was the team did user research out in the field at veteran service centers, at staff centers. This is making noise as I move, isn't it? And discovered that a lot of the language online that veterans could find was drenched in policy words. It was not plain language. And it was not using the vernacular and the idioms that the staff centers used and that the veterans were used to from their time in service. And all the benefits as they understood them from active service, they were called different things when they became veterans. And so building into a searchable system like this, not just the words of the policy, but the words that these folks know in English and in French, and there's separate idioms in these two languages, was an important part of making sure that folks could find what they're looking for when they look the way they're going to look. So, okay, another example. IRCC is Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And we sat with them early on and tried to look for pain points that we could help address in the process of coming to Canada. And it turns out that one sort of surprisingly painful point in some folks' journey is rescheduling a citizenship exam, which is the last step before you become a citizen. We heard stories from folks who had to choose between taking their citizenship exam and attending their daughter's graduation from university. Folks who had to, rearrange extremely expensive travel plans, all kinds of issues for what should be a relatively simple thing. Just take the exam on a different day. The original process was also it was a little frightening. The letter that you got was sort of officious looking, and it told you what that you were coming to the exam, and then it sort of small type at the bottom told you that if you wanted to reschedule, you could send a letter, and this came in a letter as well. So some of the work we did here was simply content design. So the email that folks get now starts in big friendly letters across the top. Congratulations, you're almost there, and it explains clearly, in plain language, what to do if you need to reschedule, which is to go visit this. Where you can choose to reschedule. Now, I will say, and this is an interesting lesson in government, in trying to make difficult change in government systems. The process is still not completely automated. So you go to the website, you pick a couple days that you're available, you submit that. It then is manually handled on the back end, and then you get an email, which means that the process is shorter than it used to be, but not as short as it could be. You don't just reschedule online instantaneously and it's all automated. And the reason for that is that the baseline system that the government uses for all the rest of the data concerning your immigration is an older system. The deployment cycles are only once every few months. You have to put in change requests. There is a queue to get in to get those change requests, unless it's security emergency or vital. And that system doesn't have an API. It doesn't have any sort of safe and reliable and sort of comfort level way to get data in and out from other systems, unless you go through a fairly onerous and long process. So now, doing this has I think, now experiencing this and other obstacles, that team is now working on how to develop an API for that system. So down the road, we do our increments, but shipping this was the beginning. Right? It was the first experience for that team in the cloud. It was the first experience for that team in Agile, and one of the things we're proudest of with this and many other projects, and one of the ways we measure our success is when we see some of these tools and practices being adopted in unrelated projects elsewhere in the department. And that's exactly what we saw. The developer that they had put on our team, who was from their department for this project, was pulled off the project toward the end and put on a new team that they were creating to work in the cloud and develop an Agile solution for another problem. That's one of our key metrics, because at one level we're trying to deliver great digital services, but at a second level, our real long play is building capacity in departments. So we worked with Impact Canada to develop a challenge platform where they can offer cash, offer money for folks to come up with innovative solutions to all kinds of problems that government puts forth. We built a thing quickly. We sort of did a quick and dirty build with them to deliver something fast that would get out there and they could learn from. And this was, again, their first experience in the cloud, their first experience sort of moving at that pace. I'm excited to say that our code is no longer live because they've gone and replaced it. And the new system that they're now developing, based on what they learned the first time through, is also in the open, is also in the cloud, and they have a user research and a designer on staff, and they are working with developers who know how to use a modern stack, and none of that happens without the first sort of scary step, right? And that's one of the things that CDS can do. It can be that risk absorber. Similarly, we worked with NRCan, to help Natural Resources Canada to help them publish home energy data in the form of an API. That was a 3-month project, and launched the API. And here's a lesson about usefully available open data. The data was available, but it was hard to sift through, and it was difficult to understand. This API simplified all of that. And after the API launched, they got an email from the folks in Vancouver. We've been working on this problem for months, and oh my God, this API just solves it for us. So the benefits of what we do stretch beyond just the people we intended to serve. This API opens up possibilities for all kinds of folks to do all kinds of things. This is a site that we built to track compliance with HTTPS and HSTS and other sort of baseline security and privacy practices for websites these days. This is an early photo. The number's not that low anymore. But that site's currently only available inside Government of Canada, while the CIOs use it and can sift through when you drill in to see which of their sites are and are not compliant, and which sites are, oh wow, I can take that site down. We don't even run that. That shouldn't be running anymore. I didn't even know it was still alive. We can shut it down and save some money. And also figure out, okay, which sites do we need to go and upgrade HTTPS. What are we working on now? So now we're working with CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, the folks who collect your taxes. They have a volunteer program that touched hundreds of thousands of people last year. And what it does is it goes out into communities all over Canada, and it helps folks who are no income or low income to file taxes. Turns out a lot of those folks don't file taxes for a variety of reasons, all of which you can imagine. Also turns out that they should, because the vast majority of them, contra their fears, the vast majority of them are probably owed refunds. In one case, we heard a woman who was reached by the volunteer program last year who hadn't filed for a decade and was owed $9,000 in refunds, and it took her from being homeless to not being homeless, which helped her get a job, and now she's off to the races. And there are many more people who can benefit that way. And on top of that, there are other benefits the government of Canada provides, but that you only get, and that the process only kicks off for you if you file your tax return. So folks are double missing out in many cases. So we are working with CRA to sort that problem out and to try and help those people file. And it turns out CRA already has a lot of the data it needs to help to put together, most of the information for those folks. And we'll see if we can help. We're working with RCMP to develop tools to help fight cybercrime, to collect cybercrime incident reports from the public, and then to take that information, try to help them put the data into formats that'll help them recognize patterns and go deal with perpetrators. We've been working on that for just a couple months now. So, what's in common with all these projects? All these projects are about people. That the best products, the best services are the ones that we create involving, the end users, the public from the get-go. So to that point, so this is Susie. Susie's a veteran who served in NATO and traveled coast to coast as an aide-de-camp to the Governor General. Incredibly proud of her time in service. This is Calagero. He's also a veteran. He's a mathematician as well. He was a soldier doing multiple tours of duty for Canada throughout Europe. Now works in our building in Ottawa. And so Susie and Calagero, in addition to being veterans and having long storied careers, they were also folks who tested with our product for Veterans Affairs. And the feedback that they gave was, the feedback we get from them and from folks like them is instrumental in developing the right services. Not to mention the feeling of pride that they have from participating and being able to help other veterans access those services. So because of their input and their generosity of time, we know we're heading in the right direction. Instead of starting from, what do stakeholders need? What do they want? What are the policy restrictions already in place? We start from the other end of the puzzle. The other piece of this puzzle for us is like, and I've alluded to some of these already, are other means of better service delivery. So we are in many cases introducing folks in departments for the first time to lean and agile and to getting out of the box of waterfall project planning, thinking in early stages of new services. We are exposing folks are getting some of their first exposure to DevOps concepts, to working in the cloud, to continuous integration and continuous improvement. We're also insisting in every case on working in the open from the get-go. When we write code, we write it open source, and when we have work product, we put it out there in the open as well. And this can be discomforting for folks who are used to lining up big launches after lots of quiet. We also engage in a fair amount of bureaucracy hacking. So in the Veterans Affairs case, we spent a good month and a half working with folks to make sure that everybody understood and was comfortable with the fact that it actually is legal to do user research with the people who use our product. That was an open question last year, and it's a question that departments have a great deal of trepidation about. So establishing those markers, that this stuff is okay to do. Here's the template, here's the little kit for showing everybody that it's okay and for doing, and here's the consent form, and here's with the language that's already vetted, so that the next department and the next department that we go to, it's all packaged up and ready to go with all the endorsements that you need from the center of government to make everybody feel, yes, okay, we can use that. So, what's next at CDS? Well, back in September, a digital industries table, which is, I guess, the word up here for committee, released a report after several months of working together. That report, let's see, folks told me Michael Litt is someone who's hanging around here sometimes, yeah? All right, anyway, this was leaders of digital industry across Canada, together for this committee, released a report answering the question, essentially, what can government do to help digital industry in Canada? How will our lives be made better if digital innovation is better integrated into our lives and our government? And they made a bunch of recommendations. And there was one that popped right out, and we went, that's the one. So we reach, and this is Toby Lutke, of course, the CEO and founder of Shopify, who chaired the committee. It's time for all our services to be online. And more specifically, in the report, this was the specific gauntlet thrown. Digitize all public-facing government services so they're accessible by web and mobile phone and available behind a unified login system by 2025. I can quibble with some of the language here and whether I think that's really the right goal and so on, but I think 2025 is an ambitious but not outlandish goal. And so we have said challenge accepted, and that's what's next, is figuring out how we can take the last 18 months of experiences that we've had at CDS, pull the lessons from them, get those lessons disseminated throughout government, work with policymakers, work with departments to figure out how to meet Toby's challenge, and to get us to a place where, in fact, our government functions the way we expect it to in a modern internet era. So that's the challenge, and it's and we don't do it because we think digital is cool, right? I think I've shown. Bless you. We do it. We do it because fewer than 20% of veterans are accessing benefits that are available and due to them. Because there are hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are who need their refunds, or because there are immigrants who shouldn't have to choose between taking a citizenship exam and going to a child's graduation. And because all of this costs taxpayers an immense amount of money that can be spent on better things than continuing to feed the legacy cost beast. If we can find ways to tackle those problems bit by bit by bit, it's not a short, fast set of solutions. It's never as easy as it looks. But everyone who does it and everyone who signs up and starts digging in falls in love with the problem, falls in love with all the problems, because they are the most meaningful, most impactful problems that you will find anywhere here in Canada. So that's where I leave it, which is to say that we don't do this alone. CDS certainly does it alone. There are dedicated, smart public servants all over government who we're working with to do all of this, and we work with all of you, and we want to hear from all of you. If you have things to say about how this works, about what problems need tackling, about any of it. We work in the open not just to sort of be transparent, but also to invite the conversation, which too often is cabined and closed off until a solution is arrived at and it's all shined and perfected. We want these conversations to happen in the open so that we can get real, candid feedback and input about all of it. So that's my pitch to you all today, and I'm happy to take questions. Sure.
Pregnant pause. Pregnant pause.
I might have to turn this off while you ask.
Oh, it's not. Oh, okay. Like that there. So how do you think about the trade-off or the tension between digitizing existing programs versus actually redesigning programs to make sense in a digital-first world? Does that question make sense?
So that question makes sense. So, so that question hits at a couple different levels. So at the level of service design, I absolutely think that the first step in all of this, when we engage with a partner department, we do it in steps. These steps are actually sort of tried and true. First, we do 6 to 8 weeks of what we call discovery, which is initial research about the problem. If there's a solution being proffered, do we have a sense of whether that's headed in the right direction? What y'all might think of as product market fit. What are the constraints on the problem space, on the solution, whether they be policy, legal, money, habit. Which are the rules that are really rules, and which are the rules that really just people have been doing for so long that they don't know that they're not rules. So there's all of that we do. And at a certain point, part of that is service mapping. It's what exactly is everybody doing here, and how exactly is the service being provided? And that gives us an opportunity to rethink whether that's the right way to provide a service. So for instance, lots of the things we talked about today and lots more about government, one of the things we would like to see is we would like to see, in many ways, for government to recede and disappear so that things happen automatically in the right ways, as long as your privacy and security are protected along the way and so on. We want this stuff to be less burdensome. So that's absolutely a question. Now, on the technical back-end side, there's a whole other set of questions about, with any given sort of existing system, do you build a new one and find a footbridge over from the old to the new? Do you part it out? Do you work in the existing confines? And those are deep engineering questions that are really fun, and that's where back-end developers fall in love with the problem. But the answer is different every time. In general, a lot of systems need modernization, and they need to do it stepwise. There are sometimes, big plans to. So my spidey sense goes off when I see a 10-year, billion-dollar plan to replace a legacy system, because my bet is that they're going to replace an old legacy system with a new legacy system, and I worry about big, long, expensive contracts for that kind of stuff, because I worry about lock-in, and I worry about people who are engaging in those contracts being disconnected from not just the work, but also from the understanding of what's actually happening and how things are being structured and put together, and what constraints are being built in, and whether folks are locked into a particular solution path for too long without maintaining the flexibility that they need to be able to pivot as they learn more about their space. So that's how we, but it's different every time. Yeah. Okay, so the question for folks who couldn't hear is whether we work on internal-facing problems in government as well as external-facing, and she's thinking specifically of Phoenix. So I'm going to explain for a second what Phoenix is, because I actually had a breakfast this morning where folks had never heard of it, and I want to make sure that everybody has. Phoenix is a payroll system for the federal government of Canada that has been long in the making since 2010, and that when it was launched in 2016 experienced a bumpy landing, to say the least, and it's resulted in many federal employees out of the 350,000 or so federal employees, a substantial number of them have had trouble getting paid on time, getting paid the correct amount. And it's an ongoing problem that folks across government are tackling in different ways. CDS has not been involved in the Phoenix and successor projects, except for a little bit of consultation on occasion. So when I arrived here, one of the things I saw was that CDS, as you might expect, when you have that kind of skill set suddenly appear inside government, was being asked to do a lot of things all at once. And it was making it hard for the team and team members to focus on doing something well. When you've got 20 things that are corner of desk projects that people are asking you for help with, it can be hard. And that's a thing that happens a lot in big organizations like the one that we're part of. And so making sure the team was focused on a few things, and that folks, and giving permission to people to say no, and helping say no was important. But to answer your wider question, yes, we do consider internal-facing projects. We don't generally do it. Our mandate is generally speaking geared toward things that help the public at large. Now, every project, if we're going to digitize it properly end to end, is going to involve something in back, and it's going to involve, and we like to say, government staff are users too. And in fact, they're some of the most important users we have on some of the things we do, because, so I'll tell a story. So I was chatting with a CIO who they decided that they were going to take a paper form that was actually a paper carbon triplicate form, and they were going to digitize it. So, so this is a carbon triplicate form for shipping, bringing things into the country on large ships, and paper would get lost. And then, so they turned the paper triplicate form into an HTML form online. You fill it out, you hit submit. Great. And all the people who use this form out on the ships, they're delighted. Oh, this is so much easier. I don't have to deal with the paper, and it's getting wet. And the CIO showed this to her executive team. And the exec team was, oh, this is great, but let me ask you something. It still takes us like 6 months, or however long it was, to process these forms. If it's all digitized, why is it taking so long still? And she said, she looked at them and she's waiting for this moment. She said, well, the first thing that happens when they submit the form online is that someone here at headquarters prints it out and walks it over to the lawyers because it needs to be notarized by hand, because that's what's in the law, or in the regulation. And she said all the light bulbs went off over everybody's head, right? Like, this is the difference between user interface and user experience. that you can improve the user interface all you want, but if all of your back-end processing that happens behind the, behind the government wall is still not digitized and still subject to rules like having an inked notarization, then you will not get the result you want. And that, so every project we do has an element to that. The internal-facing only stuff we're less likely to do, but yeah. So we select our projects based on total impact potential, reusability of the work, whether it's design patterns, code, et cetera, and on how ready the departments seem to be to take these first steps. Sure. Yeah. So yes and yes. The question is about whether we've been able to sort of implement lean startup practices, and whether we've hit barriers like the ones we hit initially with regard to user research. Absolutely. So with regard to like early stage lean and then into agile, that's not the hardest part. So gathering the team you need to do that stuff well, that's harder. So we go talk to a department, there's somebody who wants to fix a thing. They might be in the operations, office. But now because we're not gonna do it, but they have to go and get someone from the CIO shop too. And they gotta get someone from the comms shop too. And they gotta get, right? So they've got, and we work with them, we help them with that, right? But none of this stuff works if you try to work in one silo, right? So if we just went and talked to CIOs and like worked with their folks on projects, we would never get anywhere, because they're not the ones responsible for service delivery and for I'm gonna overbroad term customer satisfaction, right? Likewise, we go and sit with someone who's responsible for operations, and we don't have anyone along for the ride from the CIO shop. We're not getting anywhere either, right? And so, and that's going to remain the case as long as the IT shops own all the tech, and that's a longer-term problem that we want to get to. Like, the pendulum has definitely swung. So if you looked years and years ago, as tech was first emerging throughout large organizations, you'd see tech everywhere, right? And then there was this pendulum swing that moved a lot of organizations toward, okay, we're going to consolidate all tech under a CIO because scale and economy and consistency and like legit reasons, but all the tech gets sucked out of the offices that are using it, and it's all owned and managed and now procured and designed as well by these CIO shops who have at best an attenuated relationship to the people using the stuff. So now the question is, how do we get to a better place? This is a long-term, but right? One of the things we need to figure out how to do is how do we get to a better place where the folks who use technology and the folks most responsible and closest to the end users of that technology have more say and more ability to quickly iterate, to learn, to understand their choice, what technology choices are out there, without it all having to go into the black box of IT land. So to answer your question, so once you get those teams together, they're actually really excited. So design thinking and lean and agile methodologies are things that like Government Canada is all excited about right now. It's very buzzwordy. Some of it's, not all of it's healthy. Some of it's a little like, and people can get taken down bad paths by bad advice. But in general, it's very healthy in the sense of like people are recognizing that they need to do this. They don't always know how, and so they want help, and they go get help either from us, or they vend it, or they get people trained up, and or they hire. So that's going well. It's what happens after, right? It's how you take whatever you're doing in that fast iterative cycle and planting it inside a government ecosystem that's not entirely prepared for it. That's the hard stuff. Yeah. Go for it.
So, my name's Ben. I'm the CEO of Prez, which is one of the few gov tech companies in Canada exclusively focused on government. I'm hearing you saying you're inundated by government folks who want your team's help. They're not surprised by it because the tech is so behind. My question is ultimately, as a startup trying to serve government, there are programs like BCIP and stuff that are designed to help all of the developers and teams building cool stuff to work better with government, but they're broken. So how do we help you and plug into government? How do you take advantage of all of the wealth of expertise that communities have in KW to accomplish your mission?
Okay. So first, we're hiring, as are others. But your question more broadly is about this ecosystem and how we can make better use of it. So one of the things that government is not that good at yet, but starting to get better at, is matching needs to products in the market and going to market for those products. And there's a set of difficulties that we're working through bit by bit. So there's procurement rules that some of which are rules, some of which, again, to my point earlier, are habits that just need better understanding and need people to get a little more comfortable with. Well, actually, you don't need to submit to that constraint. You can work differently. Some of it is, and this is the real key, is great tech and great products is not going to help if government's not a savvy buyer. And that sort of writ large is like a basic problem. There aren't enough people who are forced by the process to get good at the buying. So the procurement process, especially at larger procurements, is the stages of the procurement process are specialized out, and a lot of times the folks writing RFPs are not the folks who understand what end users need or how to go figure out what end users need, and are not necessarily even people who understand, So this the process of procurement, especially at larger levels. So the higher the dollar value, the more process there is, which just stands to reason. It's the same way that the legal system works, right? You get a parking ticket, there's like one appeal, and then you're just done, and okay. But if you're being accused of a high crime, a felony, then you're going to get all kinds of mechanisms for defense and appeal and so on. So same thing. The more that's at stake, the more process there is to ensure fairness and ensure everything happens above board, which is one of many, many reasons why I advocate very strongly for smaller, shorter procurements, and for government being able to break its problems down into smaller parts, and to experiment, and to be their own integrators to the extent that they can. Not to actually do the integration work, but to be their own understanders of how the things they're buying and building come together. So part of the problem is the way that government procures. And a lot of that, again, has to do with, are there people who understand enough about this in the positions they need to be in to do it well? So that's the beginning. There are also lots of opportunities for business and government to come together. Places like this, organizations like Startup Canada, and I'd absolutely encourage you to take advantage of those. And we're also constantly encouraging government to get better at reaching out. So one of the things we're going to do at CDS in the coming months is to launch an accelerator where we're going to, try to. We're still working out how to do this exactly, but we want to utilize vendors who do good design and dev work and user research work in the processes that we step through with great ideas for how to improve services, to do discovery, to do alpha, MVP generation, to help take things from MVP to scale. More about that soon, but there are lots of little experiments going on to try to make this better. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
I think I broke it now too.
Yours to work. There you go.
I broke it too. I just want to say thank you very much for coming. I want to thank you as well to BlackBerry Key 2, MNP, Business Wire, TD Insurance, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and OCE, Ontario Centre for Excellence, for buying us a pizza. Thank you again for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And have this for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.